Hi, Raj. Welcome to my podcast. Really appreciate you coming on here. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Pete. I appreciate the invite as well. Thank you.
No, it's all right. Well, it's really good to see you, and been really excited to get you on here because I just think you bring something different. But because I don't want to spoil that, why don't we just jump straight in? And if you could tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your leadership journey, and then what you're doing now and how you got there.
Yeah, so my background is a little bit convoluted, so probably I'd say a bit more boring than your normal guest, to be honest. So I started very much in the corporate world. I started at kind of PwC, Big Four accountancy firm, and then became a chartered accountant. Spent 16 years in the city, management consultancy, banking, specializing in running change projects. Actually, so I was leading a lot of kind of projects, cross countries, kind of functions. One of the challenges in those aspects is really kind of getting buy-in for different types of projects where you're often leading and you're not line managing individuals, but you're trying to get to work for you in a particular function. That was a nice indication and start as a leadership for me. But more importantly, was after 16 years of doing that in the corporate world, I was like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life? I was like, there was a lack of purpose, a lack of fulfillment for me. And so I started looking for something else to do. And I've always been like passionate about sports, played everything growing up, always into health and fitness. So I started looking for something in that area. I found at that point one kind of startup, health fitness coaching startup to work on. And that was good. I was the CEO of that one. And that was our first startup, so a lot of learnings from that. And then during that startup, I met a guy called Dr. Warren Bradley. And some of you may know he's now a co-founder in Hytro. And it was his idea about kind of what we do at Hytro. And together, alongside our other co-founder, Paul, we created Hytro and kind of here we are today, really.
Amazing. And what year did you create Hytro?
So Hytro was created back in 2019. Do you want me to give you a bit of background on Hytro for,
Yeah, I'd love
yeah?
love to hear about it.
Cool. So just a quick kind of background on how it came about. So really coming from the genesis of Warren and kind of his idea. So Warren's background, he's got a PhD in human physiology. He spent a decade working in pro sports, and he'd seen a technique called blood flow restriction working in all settings, predominantly for rehabilitation. Now, Warren, when he wants to know something about, he goes deep into the science. You know, he's quite open about he's got ADHD, he just wants to know about everything that goes into it. And what he found is blood flow restriction is incredibly well researched. It's really well researched compared to kind of other modalities that people know about, compression gear, massage guns, ice baths, and so on. And so the potency of it in terms of kind of accelerating recovery, performance impact that you can have on individuals is scientifically robust, but nobody was using it. So most people never heard of blood flow restriction. And the reason why, and kind of Warren looked into it, was that the tools available were really expensive, cumbersome to use, you need one-on-one supervision practitioner. And that's essentially what we solve for with Hytro. By creating wearables that integrate blood flow restriction technology, we solve for those issues. And now we have the first scalable BFR product. That means you can use it independently, you can benefit from the performance advantages and the scientific credibility behind that. So we got together in 2019, developed the product in 2020, launched the business in 2020, which was a terrible time to launch a business. Coronavirus restrictions meant we couldn't get in front of pro sports teams and other aspects as well. So just really difficult. 2021 was a hard year for us. Then restrictions came off, and in 2022, everything started to kind of come together for us. So we now support over 150 pro sport teams across the world. We started very much in the domestic UK market, you know, football, rugby, cricket, Formula One as well. Made the move to the US market. So now we have NFL teams. We have the Bills and the Commanders that made the playoffs, both using Hytro products. So that's great. Across MLS, MLB, and so on. We've got Hytro all over there. We had a great moment last year where Hytro went into space. So we were part of the Polaris Dawn mission through our work with NASA and SpaceX. And now it's very much looking towards the future. So more on the pro sports and college space, looking towards kind of more the direct to consumer market as well, which will follow on from there.
Yeah, it's just incredible how it's grown, and because I've kind of journeyed a bit with you, I've seen kind of some of the ups and downs, and it's so encouraging to see where it's come from and where it's going. And because of that, I thought I would put on my Hydro t-shirt for you, Raj. Now, for those of you
Excellent.
who are not watching on the video and are listening on audio, I've just taken my jumper off and I've got a Hydro t-shirt on to match the one that Raj is wearing.
It's like a
Um,
Superman moment, that, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, I've been looking forward to that all day.
Fantastic. There we go.
Anyway, no, thanks for sharing that. And I mean, I started this podcast because um, people think they know a lot about leadership, but there seems to be a lack of application because I've worked in sports for a long time, and I've noticed, that there is a bit of a void when it comes around to leadership. There's people in leadership positions who maybe don't have the skills and experience, and then there's people who want to get to those positions and don't really know how to get there. So I really hoped that people would be able to listen to the podcast and follow the course that's on our platform, and really apply some of the lessons. And so I wanted to get you onto the podcast for two reasons, really. Firstly, is that so far I've only interviewed people who have been like PDs in sports or leaders actually in sports teams or sports organizations. But you're from a different background. You're from a business background, and you're a leader of an organization it is in sports, but you're not trying to win championships and medals, so that it's slightly different. And then secondly, I wanted to get you on because, and you won't even know this, but I've observed certain things that you do and certain ways that you operate, and from a distance, because we haven't spent loads of time together, but I've observed things that I really admire and think, wow, that's really good. Just some of the ways you can take some big picture thinking and turn it down into sort of bite-sized operational areas that need to be applied within your business, and just things that kind of I've observed from some meetings we've had together and stuff you've said and so on. So I thought, you know what, I really want to hear from you, and I think it will be really valuable for our listeners. So I guess I wanted to go in and ask more about how your leadership has changed as you've grown as a leader. So you've been around for a while, and you said you worked 16 years in the city. How's your leadership changed over time as you've grown?
Yeah, firstly, appreciate the comments there, Pete. Thank you very much. It's very, very kind of you. Um, it's, I'd say one of the things that's really different is that, let me take it all the way back to the beginning, if that's all right, in terms of kind of this. I'm a big believer that the experience you accumulate in life helps you become a much better leader. And
Yeah.
therefore, the more things you can do that in earlier on and what you see and learn will help you. And I'll give you a little example actually of that. One of the things you see in the startup world is that there's a disproportionate amount of founders with immigrant backgrounds. And there's often a good reason for that. And I see it from my own background. So I grew up in an area of England, kind of called Newbury, a predominantly white area. But obviously, I'm not white, and I come from a completely different cultural background. And what that teaches you at a very early age, where you see one aspect of life at home, you're going to see something different at school, and the way people see is that you understand that people view the world differently. And that is then perpetuated for me as I've traveled around the world. And like you, I think you live in lots of different places. I haven't lived so much in a place, but I've traveled a lot. And understanding people and understanding their deep lying motivations, values, how they like to operate helps you as a leader. And it's almost that kind of, one of the things for me is I'm big on is really listening. I'm not, kind of like people take the classic leader, if you like, is the charismatic Jurgen Klopp kind of leader. That's people I often look to. That's not me. That's not how I operate. I like to be quieter. I like to listen. I like to understand. I like to analyze. And I think understanding the people you're working with is really helpful to understanding how do you want to communicate effectively with each of those. And that's an evolving process all the time, and that will never ever stop. And then if you contrast, kind of example, the corporate world with the startup world, again, there's fundamental differences there that you have to understand how to pull the different levers. In the corporate world, nobody really cares about the mission, vision, value of the company you're working at. They probably don't even know. It's just something written on a wall. And so there's no sense often of a greater purpose other than what they want from themselves for their job. It's like they want more money for their family. They want to probably work slightly less. But they want to get promoted. And again, for me, it lacked a little bit of purpose from that corporate aspect. In a startup, it's very much you are in there because you believe in what you are doing, and you will bleed for the cause in many instances, particularly the core team that start with. And in a startup, it's actually quite easy in some ways to influence the culture as the founder and CEO, or the co-founder CEO of the company, because there's a real aspect of kind of demonstrating behavior and everyone following. So I'm a big believer in working hard, for example. I mean, it's a classic line from kind of Sir Alex Ferguson. He said, working hard is a talent. And that doesn't mean just putting in hours, relentlessly never taking a break, because we also apply a high performance mentality around that. I'll talk about that in a second, but it's being able to, just relentlessly grind, not grind, again, there's a nuance to it. It's find a way to make yourself better, find a solution, and have a balance as well. So Roger Federer said it recently about like effortless is a myth. And people look at Roger Federer and think he's like the most naturally talented tennis player ever. He thinks he got there because he outworked everyone. But at the same time, he values recovery and kind of taking care of himself and that aspect. So there's that duality of working hard, looking after yourself, and that's seeing how you kind of you get the benefit. And again, as the leader of Hytro, is demonstrating that to the team. And one of the things I need to demonstrate more is how you look after yourself and don't just work too hard, because that is the kind of prerogative of founders in some ways. But if that answers your question, actually, or not.
Yeah, no, I mean that's brilliant. And what I really like about that is that there's a lot of links to working in the sports organization, because you said like in sometimes in the corporate world people don't understand the mission and vision of the organization. In the sports organization or team, you have to, because everyone's working towards a common goal of
Yeah.
promotion or winning a championship or winning medals or whatever that goal might be. So this is fantastic, because this has got a lot of application to our listeners who are from sports. So that was really good, and it does make sense. And the other thing I really like is that you're really you're taking these lessons from sport of hard work, rest, and
Yeah.
and then work hard and rest, and that's so good for well-being. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's something that we talk about a lot internally. So we operate,
Mm.
at Hytro, we predominantly work with pro sport teams at the moment, pro sport college teams. That's kind of our market. And actually, everybody in the team loves sport. That's a kind of like a common factor. Everyone really follows it, plays it. And I'd like to say we have a high performing team. We're very lucky we have a high performing team, and we want to adopt high performance mentality. And that's one of the things we're trying to work out. How do we encourage that as we scale? Scale becomes difficult because then it's easy to keep hold of the culture, values, ways of working when you're small. And Hydra is rapidly increasing in size. I decide the team now to, I guess, when PE first kind of became aware of us and started having conversations, comes night and day. We're going to double
Mm.
in size in the next year. And how you keep that kind of same mentality, same kind of ethos, culture is really hard. And so we're having lots of conversations about that at the moment. But for us, it's very much the high performance mentality in pro sports is something we want to bring into Hydro as well.
No, I love the way that you're actually focused on the internal culture and structure as well as the goal, because a lot of founders just get carried away with more growth, more sales, and at the expense of looking after the team and the culture internally. It sounds like you've got a real balance there.
Yeah, but I would say the difficulty for founders and difficulties for small businesses is you've got to survive as well, right? You've got to
Mm,
survive and you've got
mm.
to grow. So I totally understand it sometimes if founders drop the ball on the people aspect. And I've caught myself doing that as well during this journey where you're so focused on, okay, this is the problem I've got to deal with right now. I just need to get like X amount of revenue. I just need to get to the next funding round, or I need to do this for the organization to solve this problem. And actually, you drop the people element. But
Yeah,
then there are consequences to that, and then you have people issues, which are the biggest issues you probably have to face in terms of like it's kind of how you drive an organization forward is based on everything that you have. It is the people that are kind of at work for you. So it's a constant pull for
yeah.
founders. So and how you deal with that is really important.
Yeah, and I guess the important thing is that it doesn't become a lifestyle and a habit to neglect the people. If it happens from time to time when you've just got to get something over the line to get the money in or get some funding in or whatever, fine. But it's when leaders become so obsessed with the outcome and then leave sort of a path of destruction and their team are unhappy and then there becomes a toxic environment and so on. That's where things tend to go wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And for us, though, it's picking the point when you have to do something about it. So I made a
Mm,
decision recently to hire a fractional chief people officer, Nat Falconer, who's come in and done amazingly so far. So it's great. I'm sure she will continue to do so. And the reason I did that, because I could see that as we're about to scale rapidly now, that could become more of a problem. I need some help from that. So, one of the things the way I lead is that I look for areas that I potentially need help with or as maybe slightly weaker and try and help find support from outside. It's not there's no part of me nowadays that I'm a bit older thinks I can do everything. I think when I was younger, you actually sometimes reticent to say I need help with this or I need support. Now I'm like, I know I need help with this. What's the best way of solving it? Who do I need? Bring that
Mm,
person into the company, into the fold, and fix that gap. And again, as we scale as a company, a lot of the gaps we've been filling is like, okay, I can't do that. No, I'm not that good at it, and I need help for that area. So we've done that with a CFO, COO, and so on, and now Chief People Officer 'cause it's the right time because I don't want to get to that point 2, 3 years down the line where revenues are really high, companies scale, and we've got a people problem that we could head it off right now. So to get ahead of the problem is a big thing for me.
mm. No, I mean that's good, and that I think that's a real important lesson for leaders to have the humility and the self-awareness to know that you can't do everything, and you don't need to feel threatened by people who are better than you or who've got more time than you to give to something, that you can bring people in and hand things off to them, and you can stay focused on the goals. And I mean, clearly you've evolved over your time as a leader, but are there any other ways that you feel that you've grown as Hyrox has grown?
Hi, try.
Hytro. I'm wearing the shirt. I'm looking at
Yeah,
your shirt, and I still say I said Hyrox. Sorry,
high rocks are getting
Hyrox is
everywhere, aren't they?
completely different.
They're a huge company. I mean, they're a great company to study. Actually, they're doing phenomenally well. The fact that you have to ballot to try and win a ticket to pay to go turn to an event is incredible, right? So,
Yeah, I
uh,
know their head of marketing pretty well actually, and
uh,
and their founder, who was a three-time gold medalist in field hockey for Germany. But
yeah,
their head of marketing is a Dutch guy who's based in the States. But anyway, that's another story. Apologies, you're not Hyrox, you're Hytro. Um, yeah. So, are there any other ways you feel that you've evolved and grown as
yeah.
the company's grown and changed?
There's something that's been important for me in startup life that probably wasn't as important in corporate life for me, which is more of a democratic leadership style. For me, it's
Mm,
like best idea wins. Don't care who has it. Like, it doesn't matter. Whereas in the corporate world, you're actually kind of a little bit protective of your hierarchy where you can. And I think there's a more political element in that. Whereas in a startup, it's like I don't care who has the idea. I just need to know what's the best way, what's the logic, what's the way forward. So one of the things that I do around me, I really value collective intelligence because it's often in a startup you have a problem that you've never encountered before and you've got to find a solution really rapidly, and sometimes it's existential, like that risk if you don't find a solution. Now, me sitting around in a room on my own may come up with the answer, but more likely won't. The way I often do it is I've got an incredibly talented team and then advisors around that I can go to for ways of prompting thinking. Maybe they maybe have the answer, but actually it's more than often it's prompting my thinking to see what is the best way through that. So it's tapping into the collective intelligence around you and building that network to have that is something that I really value. And then not being precious about the idea being yours as well. So I think that often I think this comes with age as well. It's like you don't care so much anymore. You're not precious about it. Like, it's just that idea that the best idea wins. That wins. That's a rule for me for sure.
yeah, I mean, I think you're playing it down a bit. I don't think it does necessarily come with age, because I've met some older people who are not at all like that. I think it's clearly maturity, and I think, like I said
Yeah,
before, you've got this kind of self-awareness to know where, how you need to behave as a leader, where you need to develop, and it's from just listening to you. And this is what I referred to earlier. I've observed stuff in you. You are very, very intentional about the way you operate. It just doesn't happen by accident. You're not just kind of bumbling along. You'll see a situation and make a decision and be quite intentional. Right, I'm gonna ask people because I value collective intelligence and so on. So no, I really I admire that. Are there any inspirations? I mean, you've mentioned like some quotes from Alex Ferguson and Roger Federer. Are there any other kind of people who've inspired you on your journey? Either people you know, people you've listened to, or just people kind of out there, books you've read? What are your inspirations?
yeah. So obviously sport has so many, but actually
Mm,
just one from a similar company to us actually in some ways is Whoop. So Will Ahmed, if you is obviously the founder of Whoop. Now we look at Whoop in many ways because they're doing similar things to us. They're building essentially a new market. They built a new market, and it took a while to get there in terms of people think wearables without a kind of an interface that you just wore on your wrist wasn't really a sensible option for a lot of people. Everyone asks, like, why isn't it a watch? Why don't you incorporate that? They built a specific category. They're heavily rooted in science research, like we are as well. They started as a kind of athlete-centric model. They started with pro sports adoption, then before moving to the consumer market. And they as a company displayed and will as well displayed levels of intense resilience in the early years, and that's kind of we've had that as well, and that's a necessity for founders. I mean, the struggles you go through as a startup founder is intense. Is certainly when people talk to me about becoming a founder, I would actually now caution people about it because
Talk him out of it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean, you've got to be realistic. It's an amazing journey. The learning curve in every aspect is incredible, but it's so intense. You cannot switch off. It's that classic thing where people go, "Oh, go and be your own boss," and you've got all this free time. You can do it. Doesn't work like that. I work 24/7. I always think about Hytro, um, particularly like strategically. You always got to be thinking like, how do we get to the next stage? What comes next? But you got to deal with the moment stuff as well. You got to reflect on the past. It's like there's so many things you have to think about, and Whoop have done that brilliantly. So Will's navigated those challenges. I've never met him. I'd like to, but just understand a bit more in depth and under the hood what it really looked like as
Mm,
well. I
mm.
think that would be fascinating. So yeah, that's probably one that I look to for sure.
That's a great example. It's interesting because I mean I'm involved as an advisor to a number of startups, and I obviously haven't had the journey that you've had because I haven't been in it. But you need, as you know, you need so much more than a good idea and a good product. Like there's so much more to being successful as a startup, and you could have the best product in the world and just not be successful because it's all about how you operate, and clearly you've ridden that roller coaster and probably feel like you're still riding it some days, but yeah, I mean, it takes a lot to be successful in the startup world. I don't know what the stats are, but you guys have done well, and long may it continue.
Yeah, it still needs to continue. That's the thing. So you're never out of the woods in some ways.
Yeah,
I'd say having a great idea and a great product definitely helps. I don't get people often say, "Ah, the idea doesn't matter." It definitely does. And we are blessed with through Warren with a phenomenal idea and an absolutely incredible product, and that's a great
yeah,
basis to start with. But I remember speaking to Yante Baku, who founded Lacole, and he was going to me and Warren. Me in particular was going like, "You got a great product now, don't fuck it up." It's like, it's true because like there's so many things that could go wrong, even though you've got a great product.
mm,
And one of the things that's very true with a founder and a leadership in this is that you've got to be so adaptable. You've got to be really happy to pivot and change, and what you start with as your idea might not end up with it, and that's pretty normal for startups. So the original idea, we talked about the bit in podcasts and things. We looked at Gymshark and we thought, okay, so if you could build product like Gymshark that actually had an impact, increased muscle, hypertrophy, size and strength, surely everyone would want that. And it turned out it doesn't quite work like that. And actually, we had to pivot the whole business from a D2C business to a B2B business to pro sports, which actually, once we did it, felt more authentic and felt right for us as a brand and as founders. It was Warren's background, it's kind of science led, it just felt right. And then the
mm,
traction started to build. And it was having the kind of for Warren and myself being able to go, yeah, we're going to make that pivot, which was a really hard call, but we had to make it. That was essential in becoming what we are now. If we hadn't made that call at that point, which I think was early 2022, to really ditch the consumer market and go B2B pro sports, I think we would have died as a company. So there's
mm.
moments in that journey where you have to really back it, and we don't have. It's not like we had data to back it up with as well. So you don't have, and again, it starts to life. You don't have all the data you'd have in a corporate environment or even pro sports, right? To back the data up to really understand what you're going. A lot of it is gut feel, intuition, and actually just going like we're going to do it this way, and then going all in
Yeah.
and yeah, just going for it. I think.
No, that's interesting. And I guess as part of the journey, you would have done some stuff really well, and some stuff might not have worked out as you expected. Are there any kind of other kind of mistakes you've made or challenges that you've had that you can think of that you go, actually, I would do that different next time, or lessons you've learned?
Well, I mean, the big one is the one I talked about at the beginning, really. So, or just a second ago. I mean, that's the biggest lesson that we kind of learned in terms of we thought something was the right way forward and it wasn't.
Mm,
And I think it's, I mean, there's so many lessons in this journey. I'll probably pick up a few others in a second, but um, it's the big thing, actually, the big thing learning after that was we could have got to that answer quicker. And it's that test, iterate, and being decisive off the back of that is really important. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned is that there was indications probably 6 months prior that the D2C market wasn't taking off. And had I had time again, I would have gone, actually, how can we test this quicker to know if this is the right way or the wrong way, and then make a more decisive decision at that point? And I think as we've gone on this journey, I've become more and more comfortable becoming decisive with less information. And I think that speeded up as an organization. And the other thing that we've come to learn in startup life is 80% is absolutely good enough for where we are right now. Everyone talks about like, oh, we're going to have the operational processes slick as everything's going to be super slick. All your customer service will be absolutely super slick. Your product's going to be absolutely mint. Not going to happen. Your products will
mm,
have problems for years and years and years forever. Our product is really good, but it's not perfect. Our customer service is really good, but it's not perfect. And they're like, it's 80% there. You've got to go with that and then iterate and improve all the time. Otherwise, you'll be that guy who thinks he's got a great idea for a startup and never starts, right? So then that's the classic
mm.
one. So moving fast, iterating, learning, developing is kind of what we just need to do all the time.
No, that's really good and helpful, and hopefully our listeners can take something from that because I've worked with people who are struggling in leadership because they struggle to make decisions. You know, they need too much information to make a decision, and it really hamstrings them and puts the business on or the organization, the sports team on the back foot. I think it is Jeff Bezos who said, I mean, you talked about like 80%. Jeff Bezos says, I only need 70% of the information before I make a decision now because I need to
Yeah.
make decisions so quickly. And I think there's definitely something to learn there. Um, because, obviously we don't want to make rash decisions and just, willy-nilly make decisions, but sometimes you need that boldness and that courage to just make a decision, don't you?
Yeah, and actually, your Jeff Bezos example just reminded me of something else he said, actually. So, and I found this is true. But one of the things he said is that as Amazon progressed and it got bigger and bigger, and he got out the weeds and he became kind of, was the leader of it and more and more people, his role changed from making day-to-day decisions to making fewer decisions but higher quality, higher impact. And actually,
Mm,
I've seen that in my role as well. So now a lot of the decision making I can delegate to the team
yeah.
within because we set the parameters, they set the strategy, they know what it is. And I want to spend more time on actually two things. One is higher quality decisions that will impact the organization in kind of a bigger way. And then two is I got this a little bit from Elon Musk actually as well. So it's fixing the bigger problems in the organization. So every organization has problems, constraints. How do I get through those that moves the organization, the Hytro, materially forward? And if I can just pick one or two of those, say every few months, and fix that, as well as kind of making the high quality decisions that I need to do, that's where my role needs to evolve to. And again, on the startup founder's journey, your role as a founder and a CEO of this company evolves so quickly as well. So at the
Mm,
beginning, we're doing everything. I remember Warren and I would make the product in Portugal with the designers and all that. We were fitting it and testing ourselves. We were then doing the fulfillment in the warehouse and all that kind of stuff. It's like you started there to this point now where you've got to start to do a higher level of stuff that is bigger and more strategic. And you've got to be comfortable on that learning curve because often on the learning curve, and many founders further along than us talk to us about this, is that actually you become not the right person or you haven't evolved with the company, you haven't developed your skill set. So on me is a constant need to improve and evolve. Otherwise, Hytro is going to leave me. So because it's going to be
mm.
beyond what my capability is or what I need to do. And I don't yet know when that point's going to be or if I can keep with it. And I just have to, it's something I have to be constantly aware of. Am I the right person? Do I have all the skills? And I try to learn as much as I can all the time. I think I put huge value in self-improvement, learning, and actually learning from people around me. And that kind of point about kind of like having that the group of intelligence around me is incredibly important for that.
Mm. No, I love that. That's a fantastic example of how you move as a leader in a startup or as an organization grows from being very operational to more strategic. But that's kind of, people talk about that, and it's a bit cliche because they say, yeah, in the early days I was more operational, now I'm more strategic. But the fact that you've given a really clear example of what that looks like, it's making kind of fewer but more important decisions, is really helpful because it helps people understand, yeah, that's what, this can look like in some senses. I wanted to, you mentioned one thing about delegation that I wanted to pick up on, because some leaders I've spoken to have found it really hard to delegate, and so it slows everything down as organizations grow or as they move up into more positions of more responsibility. They still want to be making the small decisions and still want to be micromanaging or having the hand, being involved in the weeds. And
Yeah.
so, how have you put any kind of structures in place, or how do you delegate and trust people to do it and you're comfortable? Yeah, talk to me about delegation.
I realized something recently. You kind of actually hit on it in your comment there. When you trust someone, you can delegate to them. If you don't,
Mm,
you won't, and that's a problem. So I've seen that in our organization where I've got team members. I've got to be really careful about making sure everyone is treated fairly, and you can, and it's visible in that aspect. But when I trust the team, they've delivered for me, and I'm like really comfortable what they're doing, and our strategy is set, and they're delivering against them, the metrics are being hit. I'm like, just get on with it. You don't need me. There's no problem here. I'm happy. Like that function is operating as it should do. It's delivering what we need. I don't need to get involved. So maybe like if I've got a monthly update of what's going on, that's great. There's big things I need to know about. Cool. Now, where you've got a function that not isn't operating or isn't delivering, or you don't trust that person, that's when you've got a performance issue that you need to solve the performance issue actually. And then once you solve that, then you've got trust. So it's you. My point is like, yeah, delegate because you trust. If you don't trust, you got performance issues. Solve the performance issue to get trust, and that's the route for me. I think you can't, as you get bigger and bigger as a startup, you can't. You have to get out of the weeds as a leader, and if you can't do that, then you're going to have a real problem making the strategic decisions you need to do, and talk about the higher quality ones to move the organization materially forward.
that's brilliant. No, thanks for sharing that. That's really helpful. Do you have any kind of habits or routines or anything that you do as a leader that helps you in your leadership or maybe helps you grow and learn? What does that look like?
Um, so I've kind of covered some of this before. So constantly learning. So one of the biggest things for me is talking to founders further on our journey. So I guess it's true probably in sports as well. You look who's who's operating where you want to be, and just go and speak to them and learn how they got there and the journey. Because when I speak to founders who are now behind us on the journey, it's so easy for me to go, okay, so why don't you think about this? Why aren't you doing this? I can see it so clearly. So I know that founders further ahead can see that of where we are. So learn from that example.
Just
Also, I
on
guess,
that, by the way, I've
yeah.
spoken to founders who are kind of not as far on the journey as you, who've met you and spoken to you and been really kind of inspired and encouraged and challenged. So clearly, you're doing it both ways. Not only are you learning off others, but you're passing on your knowledge as well. Sorry to interrupt you. Carry
No,
on.
no, good. I appreciate it. Interrupt me with any confidence you want, Pete. I'm okay with that. But that's the truth of the founder community, and I found that it's like other founders know how difficult it is to be founders, and therefore they're more than willing to share that experience. I'm presuming that's very similar with pro sport coaches as well. Like there's a lot of kind of shared camaraderie in that group and
Mm.
shared learnings. We definitely get that, and so I encourage that as well as learning outside of your lane. So we're in a nice spot where I can actually take learnings from pro sports as well, and that's what we're trying to do. Speaking to kind of Warren and a lot of the network that we have, like yourself, we take learnings from all different areas and then try to make it our own way. I was having a conversation earlier today about strategy, and there's so many frameworks on how you do strategy. And my comment was, I don't actually care about the framework. I care about finding a way that most impactful for Hytro, and I want to do it our way. So what works for us, and we can take ideas, but we will then blend it to go, okay, so this is what works for us, how we can communicate it to our team and deliver it that way. Um, I think, does that answer the question? I think I know what the question was now.
Um, Yeah, no, it does. And the question was, are there any habits that you've got? And you said, constantly learning, and then you said, obviously, speaking to founders who are maybe further on the journey. So yeah, does answer the question.
Cool. Good.
Um, I guess you talked about kind of frameworks, models. I wanted to touch on that. So have you got any models, frameworks, rules of thumb that you apply to certain areas of the business or your own life, or areas of Hytro that either you've kind of read in a business book, or that you've developed yourself, or that kind of you've iterated over time, that you just find helpful that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think probably covered a few in the conversations. Just a little bit of a recap actually. It's kind of maybe not framework, maybe some principles more than anything
Mm,
else of how we need to operate. So that kind of democratic leadership that we operate means like best idea wins, as I said before, always. So no ego on that. So it's like doesn't matter who it comes from, best idea wins. Speed is so important. So that's the 80% is good enough approach. So like we can't have that mentality where we've got to get it to 100% before we share it, we do something about it. We've got to go on 80% or less sometimes. Something that I personally always do is always seek clarity. So it's a weird thing. I have like this internal feeling about things. And when I don't have the clarity on the path forward and I can't see it, I have like a weird uncomfortable feeling. And it's then once I've thought it through and I can see the clarity, see the path, then then I feel better, and it's a weird sensation. And that, if I and anytime I don't have that, I can't really sleep properly. I'm not particularly hungry. It's like I've got to go and work it out, and it's often that's talking to a few people and that kind of brains trust element, but then really visualizing how the next steps look and making sure I'm comfortable with that. So that's just kind of almost like a visualization habit, if you like, of trying to work that one out. Um, I guess, and then maybe the last one would be just, and again, it's a classic, it's a bit of a cliche phrase, but like being comfortable, being uncomfortable, because that is the life of a startup. It's like if you want an easy ride, or you want to know what you're doing every day, or you don't want to be constantly challenged, startup life's not for you. This will be different every day. It will be high pressure, high stress, high workload. Like that's the life, you got to kind of accept that if that's what you want, you got to revel in it. You got to enjoy that. If you don't enjoy it, don't be in a startup.
yeah, I mean, clearly you've got ways of dealing with stress and so on. But I guess one thing I've noticed in my own journey, I'm sure you have as well, that as you kind of grow and develop, your tolerance for stress becomes much higher, and what would stress you out before no longer stresses you out anymore because you've got a much bigger problem, and so you grow in that way.
That's absolutely true. And it's really interesting. Like, if you parachuted someone else into lead Hydro and saw the levels of risk taking that we took, they'd have a heart attack, I think, at certain times. It's just we've got so accustomed to rolling the dice again and again and again on existential matters that it's almost second nature. Like I can't share all the details on this because it wouldn't be right. But there are moments when people would, if they look back at what some of the things we did, like how could you sleep during those kind of things? It's like we just
Mm.
back ourselves to find a way forward and find a way through it. Yeah, I can't really share the details on it, but it's just you have to have that insane belief as a startup founder that you will find a way to solve that problem by the time you need to solve it. And that's what it's a trait that I guess Warren and I have as founders is that we will have so far 6 years in always found a way to get through the next problem and a way around it. And failure to solve that problem could be the end of the business. And it's like, and then you get through that problem, and then what you do as a founder looking to grow it, you create another problem by making another decision by rolling the dice again, but you do it deliberately. So because you know that's the only way to grow the business, and it is
Mm.
insane amounts of risk taking. But that's the way it's done. That's the way it's done in
Yeah,
startup life.
it's funny because risk is a funny thing, because there's obviously, like, I like taking risks, but there's elements around the risk that makes you willing to take it, as in, Warren is, you and Warren work well together, you've got belief in your team, you've got belief in this collective, you know intelligence within the company, you've got some intuition, you've got experience, and so yes, it is risky, but it's not just you know, ridiculous, you know, or it might feel like that, but it's not. But the problem I've seen with people who don't like taking risks is that like we were saying, everything has to be 100%, like with decision making, you know, and it's never going to be like that. And you have to kind of back yourselves and have an incredible belief in yourself, your team, your systems, your processes, your historical success, and to just go for it. And it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but if you don't, you never grow.
Yeah, it is kind of sometimes stupid levels of self-belief and the belief in the team around you. So the classic one I kind of get a high level give would be you make a decision, say on the 20th of the month. That means that decision means you don't have enough money at that point for the end of the month, right? And you make that decision
Mm.
consciously with the belief that you will then fill the gap in the next 10 days, right? And it's like it's not a rational decision, but you make a decision because you know you need to do this to grow the business. And it's like you then back Warren, the team to solve it, to sell more product, to raise funds, whatever it is, to fill that. And that's the kind of thing we do again and again and again. Hype trend, it's less prevalent now that we're bigger, so it's actually less. And hopefully, as you get bigger, you don't ever have to do those kind of decisions. But in the early days, that's
Not
something you
that would
constantly
sink
have
the
to.
business anyway.
No, hopefully not. No, for sure. But it is a rolling of the dice all the time. And like, if you want to be a startup founder, you've got to get really comfortable risk taking, really comfortable high levels of stress. And if you don't take those risks, then I think you struggle to grow at the rate you need to. So that's part of the life.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. Just coming back to some of the things we talked about, like we talked about inspirations, we've talked about kind of habits and so on. Do you like to read a lot? Do you read books? Do you read articles? Do you read social media? Do you subscribe to any you know, like Harvard Business Review, or do you listen to podcasts, or what? How do you kind of feed yourself and develop your own you know, your own skills and values and so on as a leader?
So a lot of the ones you described. So the problem I've got at the moment is I've got two and a half year olds, right? So that between Hytro and them, that doesn't give me a lot of time. But I love to read. I've always loved to read, and so prior to them a little bit, I used to like devour books about startups, leadership, kind of all those kind of things. I think it's incredibly useful to see those different perspectives. Same with podcasts as well. That high performance podcast is the classic one everyone likes to listen to, and then you get lots of stuff from that.
Yeah.
And now this podcast, obviously, so this will probably take over from them, I think, hopefully. So it's
Great
the
plug
next
there.
there you go. So podcast as well. Back to the point about I think people like understanding the journeys that everyone else has been on is incredibly valuable and how they've tackled it. There's so much you can learn with how get a startup founder, like how that founder approached a similar problem to what you have and how they overcame it, how they generated, the funding, how they did their business models, like all of that's there. It's like there's information just waiting for you to go and find it. And founders are incredibly open with other founders. I was speaking to a founder of another kind of sports tech firm the other day, and I've never met him. We just got introduced, and like we were on a phone call, and it's like we were just incredibly open about the challenges that we both had, which was so useful afterwards. And then after that, I had a question on kind of like pricing and stuff like that. And it's like it's generally keep it all confidential. I just said this is what we're doing, what are you thinking. He was sharing what his model was with us, and it's that if you can build that and those kind of really deep, a bit more meaningful relationships that help you as a business, and there's that trust, that's fantastic. It helps you learn, takes you forward. But yeah, all of the above, as you kind of mentioned, reading for me is a big one. It's just I wish I had more time to do it. I think is good. That's the problem in
Yeah,
everything about time.
yeah, yeah. I can definitely identify with that. No, but it's good that you can that there are, you know, fellow founders out there where you can have a level of trust, you know, especially if you're in a if you're not competitors, then you can have a really high level of openness and sharing because you're walking a very similar journey, but you're not competing, and so that must be nice to know that there's people you can get on the phone to or meet up with and just kind of share ideas and share your stories.
Yeah, and so conversely, actually, there's sometimes I've met founders where they've been really cagey, and it's like,
Mm.
what are you worried about? It's like, what am I going to do? Like, how do you lose by sharing your journey and what the real kind of story is? And often, when I talk to founders, I'm going to tell you the real story rather than like sometimes what people think is a story, because the warts and all is really important to understand the business and where we come from. And then sharing that with somebody and getting their input into how their journey is, we all win. But sometimes when
Mm.
founders are a bit cagey, you kind of think, what's not right about your business, or what are you trying to hide about it?
And these
So
would be people who are not even in competition then.
yeah,
Yeah,
not in competition. Just
yeah.
what's the reason of not sharing? And you kind of immediately think there's something not quite right in the business front there that
The
maybe is
numbers
not
don't add
visible.
up.
Yeah, something. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's just I'm quite big on transparency in that sense. There's like,
Yeah.
particularly when there's a win-win for everyone in that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Raj, it's been really, really good to chat to you. I really appreciate your openness. It's been fascinating hearing you, talk about the journey, and there's some absolute gems in there that, I've learnt loads of, and so I'm sure our listeners will get a lot from. Is there anything you want to say in closing? Any final tips for aspiring leaders? Anything that you want to reiterate that you've said just as we bring this to a close?
I guess one thing I will say is that leadership styles are unique to each in your own. I think that there's definitely a kind of what people think leadership should be and what the reality of it is. It can be so different on in many different ways. Don't I want to do it my way? I'm very clear about that. It's like I'm not that classic happy clappy kind of person. I wouldn't say I was particularly charismatic. I'm no Jurgen Klopp or anyone like that. I want to do it my way, and I think I'd encourage each person to do that. Don't copy anything else. Just do what you want to do. It's not profound advice, but it's fairly sensible. I think I've seen it a number of times where you almost see poor imitations of other leaders, and it's like that's not going to be helpful to anyone. So I think I remember watching one of the other podcasts, and someone talked about being authentic as a leader. Um, I agree with that. I would very much agree with that. Do it your way. There's no right or wrong. Do what's most comfortable for you.
Brilliant. No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing, and I really want to wish you and Warren and the team all the best with Hytro. And yeah, can't wait to meet up again and have a chat at some point.
Thank you for having me on it, Peter. Really appreciate all your support in this journey as well. And yeah, it'd be great to see you again at some point.
No worries. All right, thanks. See you, Raj.